I asked my husband for a platonic marriage in front of our closest friends while the coworker I had been sleeping with for 14 months sat at our table. Grant thought I was publicly removing sex and romance from our marriage. Daniel knew I was trying to preserve the home, money, and dependable husband I had no intention of giving up. When Grant calmly took the guest room, I thought I had forced him to accept my terms. I did not understand that he had only begun making his own. The dinner was at our house on a Friday. Nora and Caleb had known us since we were newly married. Daniel worked beside me in client strategy, and I had told Grant he was new to the area and had nowhere to go that weekend. Grant added another place setting without hesitation. Halfway through dessert, Nora joked that she and Caleb sometimes felt more like roommates than spouses. I looked directly at Grant and said, "That is actually where we are. Grant and I have evolved into a platonic marriage." Grant stopped passing Daniel the coffee. Daniel stared into his cup. I kept talking because I had rehearsed this speech for days. I said Grant and I still loved each other, would keep the house and our shared finances, and would remain faithful. We were simply done with romance and physical intimacy. Then I made it crueler. I had not wanted him touching me for a long time, I said. Pretending otherwise is unfair to both of us. Daniel knew I had left work with him 2 nights earlier. Grant folded his napkin beside his plate. "Is this the first time you are asking me?" The honest answer was yes. I smiled as if he had misunderstood a conversation we had somehow already shared. "I am saying it out loud now," I replied. "But yes, this is what I want." He nodded once. "All right," he said. "And I will take the guest room tonight." He collected his plate and carried it into the kitchen. He did not expose me, insult me, or ask our guests to vote. His calmness left my announcement sitting in the middle of the table exactly as I had made it. Nora and Caleb left first. Daniel stayed long enough to help Grant stack the glasses. I watched my husband thank the man who had been sleeping with his wife for more than a year. At the door, Daniel gave me the same polite nod he used at work. Grant was standing behind me, so Daniel did not touch me. The restraint felt obscene after everything else, but at the time I was relieved. When the door closed, Grant asked why Daniel had looked less surprised than everyone else. I said we had talked generally about people staying married without sex. That was technically true. Daniel and I had discussed it in his bed while I explained why I would never leave Grant. Grant looked at me for several seconds. "Does Daniel know more about our marriage than I do?" "No." That was the first direct lie I told him after asking for a more honest marriage. He took a clean pillowcase from the linen closet, unplugged his phone charger, and carried both into the guest room. I followed him and said he did not need to punish me. "You announced the terms," he said. "I am trying to understand them. I wanted Grant as my husband in every way that made my life stable. He handled the mortgage, cooked most weeknights, called my mother on Sundays, and showed up beside me at company, the events where I hated entering alone. He knew when I was overwhelmed before I admitted it. He never made me earn those things by being charming. What I wanted from Daniel was different. He looked at me as if every room improved when I entered it. He sent messages after meetings about the way I had crossed my legs or lowered my voice. With him, I was not the woman who forgot to buy detergent or left cabinet doors open. I was exciting because he only saw me in selected hours. The affair began after a client conference in Denver. Daniel and I stayed in the hotel bar after our tea went upstairs. I told myself I had been lonely. The truth is that I enjoyed being wanted by someone who had never seen me ordinary. I came home and let Grant unpack my suitcase. For 14 months, I met Daniel at his apartment and hotels after late client dinners, and once in the backseat of his car in an airport garage. Then I went home to the man who had washed the sheets, paid the electric bill, and left the porch light on. Daniel eventually asked when I was leaving. I told him I was not. He said he did not want to remain a hidden compartment in my life. That was when I invented the platonic marriage. In my mind, the arrangement solved everything. Grant would no longer expect intimacy I was giving someone else. Daniel would hear me publicly admit that my marriage was no longer romantic. I would keep my home, my name, my family, and both men's loyalty. The only person whose choice I never included was Grant. The next morning, he made 1 cup of coffee. He carried it to the back steps while I stood beside the empty machine. I asked whether we were going to act like strangers. No, he said. I am acting like a man whose wife told him in front of another man that she does not want him touching her. I said I had been trying to avoid humiliating him in private for months. Grant gave a short laugh. You think the private conversation would have been the humiliation? He remained courteous. He paid his share of the bills, cleaned what he used, and answered practical questions. But he stopped automatically including me. He cooked 1 portion. He did his own laundry. He no longer asked whether I wanted to walk after dinner. At first, I treated each missing kindness as evidence that my request had hurt him. Some ugly part of me enjoyed that. I had spent more than a year telling myself he would not notice my distance. Now his withdrawal felt like proof that I still mattered. Daniel did not react the way I expected either. On Monday, he closed the conference room door after our morning meeting and asked what the dinner had been. I told you I was going to make things honest, I said. You told your husband he gets the mortgage and family dinners while I stay a secret. I reminded him that I had called the marriage platonic in front of everyone. Daniel stared at me. You promised him fidelity while I was sitting at his table. Hearing the sentence in his voice made the plan sound as grotesque as it was. I reached for his hand. He stepped back. You do not want a platonic marriage, he said. You want 2 men doing different jobs. He told me he would not come to the house again and would not see me outside work until I made an actual decision. I became furious. I had risked dinner partly for him, and he was refusing to reward me for it. That anger lasted until I understood what I had expected. I wanted Daniel to appreciate the public rejection of my husband as a romantic gesture. Brad declined my company reception that Thursday. He had attended every year and always knew when to rescue me from a long conversation. Daniel will be there, he said. You already have someone who knows more about your life than I do. For 1 second, I thought he knew. My face must have changed because Grant watched me carefully. What? He asked. I said nothing. I claimed I was tired and went upstairs to get dressed. At the reception, Daniel spoke to me only when other coworkers were present. I watched couples lean toward each other and felt sorry for myself. Grant had refused to play the husband I had publicly demoted, and Daniel had refused to play the lover I kept hidden. I was surrounded by consequences, and still thinking of them as abandonment. That Sunday, my mother expected us for lunch. Grant had repaired her porch railing the previous month and promised to look at a cabinet door that would not close. I came downstairs dressed and found him reading on the back steps. I asked whether he was ready to leave. I am not going, he said. I reminded him about the cabinet. He said he would arrange a separate time to finish the work he had promised. My mother does not need to know every detail of our bedroom, I said. Grant closed his book. You told your friends. You brought Daniel into it. But with your mother, I am supposed to protect your privacy by showing up as the same husband. I said lunch had nothing to do with sex. Exactly, he replied. You want to remove the part of marriage you do not want and still call me whenever the husband part is useful. I drove to my mother's house alone. She had set 2 places beside hers and bought the dark bread Grant liked. When she asked where he was, I said he had work to finish. The lie came easily because I had spent 14 months practicing. Daniel was always a late meeting. A hotel was always a client dinner. Grant's absence was work. I kept changing the name of whatever threatened the life I wanted to display. My mother wrapped Grant's portion before I left. I carried it home and placed it in the refrigerator. He never ate it. 2 days later, I threw it away and felt resentful about the wasted food. Even then, I was more comfortable grieving a sandwich than naming the reason my husband had stopped coming with me. Nora called the next day. She asked whether the announcement had truly been the first time Grant heard it. I said we had been moving in that direction for months. Melissa, she replied. Grant looked blindsided. Daniel did not. I went cold. Nora said she had noticed Daniel watching me before I spoke and looking down when Grant asked whether I meant it. She did not accuse me of an affair. She simply asked why my coworker seemed to understand my marriage before my husband did. I told her she was imagining things and ended the call. That lie cost me the last person who might have helped me tell the truth before Grant forced the question. 5 days after the dinner, Grant sat across from me at the kitchen table. He had opened a separate checking account for his salary and changed the automatic mortgage payment so we would each transfer half. He was not hiding money. He showed me every number. Then he said, "A platonic marriage is not enough for me. I am going to stay with my brother while we decide whether to separate." I had expected the guest room to contain his reaction. I had pictured him angry but nearby, still handling the house and waiting for me to decide whether I missed him. His brother lived 40 minutes away. The distance felt like a door I could not control from inside. I panicked. "There is something else," I said. Grant did not move. "Daniel?" My silence answered first. He told me he had not known. He had only seen Daniel's face at dinner and my face when he mentioned the reception. He had spent 5 days trying not to accuse me without evidence. I could have lied again. Instead, I said it had been 14 months. Grant looked toward the dining room. "Was he in this house because you wanted him to hear you reject me?" I said yes. "And when you promised fidelity?" I looked down. Grant pressed both palms against the table. His voice stayed quiet. "You put your lover at my table and asked me to promise myself to both of you." There was no defense against that sentence. He walked into the guest room and packed the clothes he had moved there. He took work shirts, running shoes, medication, and the framed photograph of his father from the bookshelf. He did not take our wedding picture. He did not tear it up either. I followed him to the entryway and said their affair was over. "That is between you and Daniel," he replied. I told him I loved him. "You loved what I kept running," he said. "I do not know if you loved me." Then he carried one bag to his car. For the first week after Grant left, I kept trying to identify the sentence that would bring him home. I wrote apologies and deleted them. Every version contained a request. "Understand me. Remember our good years. Do not make a permanent decision while angry." Grant was not acting angry. He answered messages about bills and ignored everything else. Daniel asked to transfer to another client team. Our director approved it without demanding personal details. He sent me one final message saying he had been wrong to participate for as long as he did and would not contact me again outside required work. Losing Daniel did not make me faithful. It only made the affair unavailable. I called Nora and Caleb and told them the truth. I said Daniel had been my lover for 14 months. Grant had not agreed to a platonic marriage, and I had used their presence to make disagreement harder for him. Noah cried. Caleb asked whether Grant knew before the dinner. When I said no, he ended the call. My mother reacted differently. She kept asking whether Grant and I could go to counseling before making a decision. I finally told her that urging him to wait would be another way of making him carry the cost of my timing. She went quiet, then asked what I needed. "Nothing from him," I said. That was the first answer I gave that did not make Grant responsible for easing my fear. 2 weeks later, he asked to meet with a mediator. He wanted the formal separation, a valuation of the house, and a date for listing it if neither of us could buy it out the other. I accused him of throwing away 9 years. Brent looked at me across the mediator's table. You spent 14 months making decisions about our marriage with someone else. I am making this one with you in the room. I signed a temporary agreement. The house went on the market in early spring. I could not afford to keep it alone, and Grant did not want to return. We divided furniture without fighting. He took the coffee grinder, his father's tools, and the old armchair from the den. I kept the dining table because neither of us wanted to explain to the movers why we both stepped away from it. Grant filed for divorce the week an offer was accepted. I did not ask him to delay. I gave the attorney the document requested, corrected the false version with our families, and stopped turning every practical exchange into another apology. None of those actions made me admirable. They were simply the first choices I made without expecting a man to reward me for them. The divorce is not final yet. Grant rents an apartment near his brother and has asked that we communicate through email unless the house requires something urgent. I have not seen Daniel outside work. When we pass in the hallway, we speak like colleagues who once made each other's lives worse. Last Sunday, I packed the final kitchen box. 4 pale rectangles remained on the dining room floor where the table legs had blocked the sunlight. I remembered Grant placing a 5th setting for Daniel because I had told him a coworker needed company. The table would not fit in my apartment. Grant did not want it, so the buyers added it to their offer. On closing day, a young couple measured the wall beside it and discussed where a high chair might go. I signed the papers and left before they finished. I had believed marriage was the part of my life that would remain fixed while I took whatever else I wanted. Instead, the house was empty, the table was wrapped in a moving blanket, and both men had made the choice I tried to deny them. In my new apartment, I'd eat at the counter. There's room for 2 stools, but I bought one.